Cloud. Okay, now we are recording. Then I will share my screen. All right, it's 5 p.m. Hi and welcome everyone to this week's Keptn Dev meeting. Yeah, as usual, when you have questions that came up in the last week or when you want to discuss something, please feel free to raise your hand or to post a question into the chat, and we are happy to answer them throughout this meeting. Other than that, let's jump to the first agenda point. Yeah, actually, there are no open questions from the last meeting. I just want to point out that there were 3 open discussions that were publicly available on GitHub. The first one was about the execution plane services and how they get their events from the control plane. Yeah, the discussion was ongoing on this issue, and we actually came up with a conclusion, and you will find the link to the conclusion right here. Please follow that one to get updated on what this discussion ended up with. Just to let you know, we will not change the implementation as it is currently in the alpha release. We will go with that also with the 0.8.0 version. But when we see the demand that external services need more capabilities to stream events or to fetch other types of events, then we want to improve that feature and that capability. Then the second discussion was about the sequence and service mapping. Also, please find the conclusion right here. What we came up with is actually to not model or to not store the mapping between a service and a sequence, but rather provide default sequences for an evaluation, a remediation, and delivery. And based on these 3 types, the shipyard controller will then kick off a certain type of sequences. And last but not least, there was also an ongoing discussion about the execution or the orchestration of a sequence when it comes to a failure. And in particular, when a service responds or sends out an event that the result of his task was not successful or was actually failed, then we decided to stop the sequence where it is right now and to stop the sequence and not to continue with the other tasks that are listed. But in order to act upon a failed sequence, you will get the flexibility to start a so-called subsequence where you can then define event filter that help you to do a follow-up task in case of something has been broken. And again, please find a brief summary of this discussion here in this conclusion. And there are also a couple of issues linked that will then be implemented to make the shipyard controller aware of this new behavior and also to introduce the mechanism of allowing events to be filtered. All right, yeah, that's all about the ongoing discussions. And I will now directly hand over to Christian, who will show us quite a lot of cool things in regard to GitHub Actions.
Thank you. Okay, yeah, first of all, it's a lot of PRs and a lot of code that has been added, so I won't go into much details. If you have questions, just hit me up via Slack. That's a little bit easier. First of all, we have another new GitHub action that everyone can use. It's called GitHub Action Build Docker Image, and the idea is, well, I mean, Docker build is nothing we really need to wrap. But there's a couple of things that are Keptn specific that we have wrapped within this bash script for building the Docker image and for pushing the Docker image. And essentially, we just wanted this code to be centralized so we can reuse it in Keptn Core and Keptn Contrib and Sandbox. I just see I forgot to add the example and the inputs and outputs. But essentially, in the Keptn repository, there's an example for it. And actually, I think I have an example in the next PR here. Yeah, that's actually this. So I've already made PRs that have been merged to Keptn Contrib and some Keptn Sandbox services to use this new GitHub action. So instead of having to do all these preparation steps and having to have certain other bash scripts and manifests in your repository, you don't need them anymore now. You just use this GitHub action and you supply it with the version name that you want your Docker image to have, the image name, and a date time that is being stored in the manifest as well. And with that, basically, you just get your Docker image built and pushed to Docker Hub. Any questions so far? All right, then let's continue. Um, yeah, there is another one that's also on a Keptn Contrib service here. I basically have introduced a fix because external contributors or people that work with forked repositories were unable to execute certain steps, and I fixed that by adding some checks here. So, for instance, if it's a push, it's always a push on the local repository, so that's fine. Or if it's a pull request and the head repository needs to be the GitHub repository that we're on. It's like a simple fix in this case to not perform the Docker login if none of this is true. And so, for instance, if you are on a forked repository, then you would be a pull request, but the repository would be a different one, so you wouldn't go into the Docker login. The problem itself is not related to Docker, but to GitHub or GitHub Actions, because secrets itself are not shared with forked repositories, which is good because else you would just have to fork our repository and you could access the secrets, which is not so good. All right. Any questions to that last one? Good. So I've also had some things that were specific to Keptn that I just want to go through. First of all, I have added some timeouts in the integration tests. So Keptn install must not take longer than 10 minutes. Creating a Kubernetes cluster on Google or with K3s must not take longer than 10 minutes. And some of the integration tests itself, I've also timed then between 5 and 15 minutes, just in case something goes wrong. They will just run for 1 hour or even 2 hours. I think that's the limit for GitHub Actions, and we know that it shouldn't take that long. So these timeouts help us to fail faster in the tests. In addition, we've upgraded Istio in our tests to version 1.8. Yeah, I mean, we had 1.6.14 in our script for installing Istio. It's now to 1.8.2. And we also updated our tutorials to include the 1.8.2 release. The general integration test workflow has been enhanced by a lot. So for instance, this workflow will now create, let me check if this is the right one. Now you can actually see the timeouts. Yeah, that's not the right one. Sorry, that's a different one. But this one, yeah. The general workflow has been enhanced a lot. So for instance, we're now automatically creating a draft release when the integration tests are running and when they're finishing. Then you'll just get a draft release like this one. And draft releases are not visible for people that have no write access. So if you're just a consumer of Keptn or if you're just a contributor, you might not see this draft release. But once we are done with this, we can edit this draft and publish this release. Then it would be visible for you. Nevertheless, this is something that helps us for creating releases, whether it is a nightly release or an alpha or a pre-release, whatever. This will just automatically grab the release notes. In this case, it grabs the release notes from the develop folder or from the release notes develop file, rather. So this is all just in the file, and this still needs to be written manually. So there's room for improvement if we ever want to auto-generate this. But what's auto-generated here below, sorry, is this one. It's the CI information. It just tells you, okay, this has been built with this version string, and this is from pull request 3010 with a certain date time, a git sha. So you can even click on that here. It will tell you what is part of this pull request in this case, or if you are in the master branch, it will just tell you it's everything up to this git sha is included. You have a link to the GitHub action that's run, so you can see some log messages here related to this if you need to, or you can even dig deeper into the logs of the integration tests if you need to. And then you get a log of Docker images that this release contains or needs actually to be installed. And last but not least, you get this matrix of integration tests, whether they have succeeded or failed. So this is now also part of this release on GitHub releases. This actually adds a lot of transparency for people that want to install, let's say, a pre-release, because then we can say, oh yeah, well, this use case has failed at this point in time, or wasn't tested for some reason, or has only failed on one platform, and we need to dig into this. So this adds a lot of transparency basically for our end users, and obviously for the final release, everything should be green, or in this case, there should be success in every column and every row, maybe except for the ones that we skip on purpose because continuous delivery or delivery assistant use cases, they need a lot of CPU and memory, so they only run on GKE right now. Last but not least, this is something I also want to share with you. We're auto-generating Kubernetes resource limit and CPU data, and we're appending it to the release. So here we see the resource limits that we've captured for Google Kubernetes Engine. And we see, for instance, API Gateway Nginx. The pod has a container, and this container has CPU limits and memory limits, as well as CPU requests and memory requests. That goes through for all our deployments, all our pods that we have in Keptn. So this is a nice overview here. And in addition, I've added a column called images. This will also help us and has some transparency for our end users to see what images are we using in our Keptn installation. So for instance, we're using Nginx unprivileged 1.19.4 based on Alpine for our API gateway, and we're using Keptn/API with a certain tag for our API service. I think for MongoDB, we can also see this. Yeah, for MongoDB, we're using CentOS MongoDB 3.6, CentOS 7. I think that's an image that's related to OpenShift, or for the OpenShift installation. Yeah, so with that, we can see a lot of things here. That's quite nice. We also have described node appended below here, because this also helps us to see not just what does Keptn need, but what does a Kubernetes installation also with Keptn need. And in this case, we can say the full installation of Keptn needs a little bit more than 2 virtual CPUs and a little bit less than 4 GB of memory, plus obviously the services that you deploy or the applications that you deploy with Keptn will need some extra. All right. Any questions on that?
Really cool. I like it to get all this information now on a release, because yeah, it gives us more a better understanding of what Keptn contains, and what will be included in a release.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, I mean it's even nice because you get not just the pod, you get it split by container in here. So we can start to optimize the limits and requests for each container, even if we have to. I've created a follow-up issue on that, by the way, because I believe the numbers that we're seeing here, we can optimize them a little bit. So, for instance, configuration service, it might not need 128 megabyte of memory in a normal deployment. It probably will have less. If we optimize all of them, the requests and the limits, then we can probably reduce the number here on the right, which will also help people that have more restrictive Kubernetes environments with resource quotas, because that's something we haven't considered yet, but we've seen this use case coming up sometimes. All right, I think that's it from my side. If there are no more questions, I will hand over to Florian.
All right. Okay, this week I would like to show you one extension that I've made. Otherwise, I've been quite busy with bug fixes. But the one new thing I would like to show you is the inclusion of the statistics service that was previously a part of the Keptn sandbox organization. And since we got pretty good feedback on that service and many people wished for it to be accessible a little bit easier and to actually include it within Keptn Core and have it installed out of the box. So that's exactly what we did. So now if you will install the next Keptn version that we're going to release, you will now also have, if you go to the Swagger UI here of the Keptn API, you will see a new entry called statistics, and that will be the API endpoint for the statistics service. And then you can use that one to gather more insights about your Keptn installation and see how many events of which types you have sent and which services they were taken care of by. All right, other than that, or are there any questions about that? All right, if not, let's have a quick look at the working items and quickly go over the bugs I've worked on during this week. So the first one, yeah, as you might have seen in the overview that Christian just showed us, the quality gates standalone use case was failing on all platforms. So I've mainly worked on that quite a few times actually to make that work again. And I think with the latest fixes, it should run through again and pass again. So let's keep our fingers crossed on that one. And yeah, and also this bug here is related to the continuous delivery use case where we test the artifact delivery of a new service. So this one was failing as well due to a extension I've made to the Helm service where I tried to retrieve the port of a deployed service, so the port by which the service is accessible from within the cluster it has been deployed to. So there I added a check that was a little bit too restrictive, and therefore in some cases the port couldn't be determined successfully, and that led to an error. But that has been fixed now with the pull request I made for this bug. Then this bug here, API, allows creating projects with special characters, while CLI does not. So that was caused, or the cause for this, that was because when creating a project via the CLI checked whether the created project or also the service that should be created is has a valid name, so it doesn't contain any special characters and so on. And that logic was implemented in the CLI, but not in the API, and we changed that. So now the CLI is a little bit dumber, so we removed the validation from there and moved it to the API because that's at the end of the day how it should be. So the API should do the main work and the CLI should be as stupid as possible. So that's what we did here. Then another thing, this was quite an interesting bug. So when you were using the CLI, I should say this doesn't concern the previous released version. It just happened during development. So we did some changes to the get events command from the CLI. And when one of the events contained a string in a JSON property that started with an Angular bracket, the JSON marshaller or the printf function we use to output this event try to interpret it, this string value as a HTML tag, and then it basically messed up the resulting output, and that has been addressed with that, and now that is fixed again. All right, and the next one.
Does this also apply for API responses? Let's say that go through a proxy and then you don't get the JSON output that you expect, but the proxy gives you an HTML error. Does this also help with that, or?
No, this happened at a different place. So I checked the responses from the API, and they were in the expected format. All right.
This was more like a problem with fprintf function from Golang. So if you put there a string without a format, it will be interpreted weirdly.
Yeah. So
that's actually that's a good to know, because that might affect people writing contrib services and sandbox services too.
Yeah.
It's a nice gotcha. So yeah, let's keep our eyes open for that.
Where that happened was the content of an evaluation finished event where we do have the comparison criteria, for example, smaller than something, and then that bracket here led to that error. So it was quite fun to debug.
So the thing here to take away is never use fprintf without the format qualifier. So we just put in the string without the format, like, I don't know, %s. It's a difference.
Yeah. All right. The next error was concerning the install command of the Keptn CLI. So there we had the problem if for some reason the Helm chart couldn't be installed successfully, because, for example, one of the deployments ran into an image pool backoff. The CLI was waiting for an indefinite amount of time. And here I've added a timeout to the Helm upgrade command. And after 10 minutes, the CLI will abort the installation and return a proper error message in case the installation didn't complete within that time frame. All right, and finally, the last one here in this list is fetching resources from folder via API networking. So for example, if you were using the external API endpoint exposed by Keptn, and you were trying to load a resource, for example, from within a directory within a service. So for example, the load.jmx resource in the directory jmeter, then that was not working because our Nginx was decoding the provided URL, and then the path to the resource you were asking for wasn't received properly by the configuration service. And that has been addressed in this bug, and now it is working with one thing to know. So if you want to access a resource, you have to escape the slash within the path, and then it is working. And actually our distributor that now also acts as a sidecar for the Keptn API will automatically take care of that. So if you send the resource requests to the Keptn API via that distributor, it will do the proper escaping of the slash character automatically for you. All right, and I think if there are no further questions, I am going to hand over to Ermin.
Thank you very much. I'm going to present you one pull request for Keptn's Bridge today. It's about showing task details in the sequence view. Yeah, let's have a look at the issue first. So the idea is when clicking on a sequence here, the details should be displayed next to this list. And yeah, it should show the steps and the tasks which have been executed. If the task is still active, yeah, we show an indicator that it's still loading. And when finished, it should show the finished event, the result, and yeah, the message, if there is any message. So let's have a look at the pull request, or actually I will do a live demo. The thing that I did here also is I fixed this refactoring task. So I moved the sequence tab from the project board in a separate component and then implemented this new feature. So here you can see how it looked before. And yeah, we'll see how it looks now. I just sent in a new artifact. So I started an artifact delivery for the cards service, yeah, which is here now running. And as we can see, it finished on the dev stage, and it still shows the loading indicator for the staging stage. Here I can see that this artifact delivery started in dev at that time and finished with a pass result. And I can also see all the steps that happened. So we had a deployment, a test, evaluation, and the release here. For example, for the evaluation, I can see here because yeah, it finished with a pass result, but I have no SLI provider configured. I can see here the message, no evaluation performed by Lighthouse. They're ongoing by this loading indicator, and as soon as this is finished, yeah, I will see the next steps. And also here on the left side, so on the root sequence, on the root element of this sequence, I can see that this sequence is still ongoing, but as soon as it's finished, it will show the icon. But yeah, this part here will be also refactored or enhanced in a separate issue. Are there any questions about this?
Really cool. I like it very much. Just one thing, when you click now on the event for a certain task, do we get all three types of event, like the triggered, started, and finished?
Yeah, actually this tile is the triggered event. So this is the evaluation was triggered here. And then you see a list of all started and finished events actually here. So you see that the Lighthouse service started here and finished with result pass. Yeah, and you see also the message.
Yeah, but actually I was asking for the payload of those events.
Oh yeah, the payload. Oh, maybe for some reason something happened while merging with the latest state from the master, but actually I can see the payload of the triggered event here. And I will show here a button for the payload of the started and of the finished event next to the event itself. So yeah, you can also see, of course, more important is the payload of the finished event. For this, I showed and this button also next to this finished line.
Could you scroll up, please?
Yeah, of course.
Where do I see in which stage those events are currently in?
Yeah,
Just-
I have the staging stage selected here now. So this is artifact delivery for the
Yeah.
staging stage, and I see only, of course, the events of the staging stage.
Yeah,
But yeah, you're right. Maybe we can
highlight it.
highlight the selected stage here better in this timeline on top, of course.
Yeah, I see. Now I see. Okay. Yeah, you can select it. This is
Yeah,
nice. This feels good, but yeah, like some highlight would definitely be nice here. So
of course. Yeah, now when you're saying it, yeah, it's obvious. But as you can see, the view itself is much more compact, and yeah, you see what's happening on the staging stage. Also, the tiles are easier to read, and yeah, when you expand them, then you see what happened here.
nice.
Maybe a question to the entire round. In the wireframe, we actually stacked the events on top of each other, meaning that they were ordered or they were shown in opposite order. What feels better for you, having them like
Oh yeah,
Ermin implemented, where we add the tasks on the bottom, or where we stack them on top? Do you know what I mean?
I didn't get it. Sorry.
Okay.
it's about the order of these tasks here. They are now ordered, yeah, from the first to the last. And in the wireframe, actually, we wanted to show the last event or the last task on top. So changing the order.
So for me, I'm always reading this like a book. So this order that Ermin is presenting looks okay to me.
Yeah. I would also say that that's why the result is like it is now. Yeah, in the wireframe, we actually designed it the other way around, but it doesn't feel like, yeah, especially when the events are coming in one after another. Yeah, it just feels better this way from my point of view.
I mean, when I see this picture, I also like it as it is right now, because I think a sequence will never ever have 20 tasks. It will be around 5 to 7 tasks in one sequence, and you will all get them on one page. There is not actually a need to scroll. And based on this assumption, I think having it this way works as it is.
Yeah, I can provide a new image also with yeah, different ordering. We can discuss that on the pull request and have a look what feels better. But I also think that this order is better. Yeah, in case of a social media feed, it makes sense to have the newest items on top. But in this case, as you said, there are just a few items.
Mm.
However, on the left side, it's the opposite then. So you
Yeah.
need to kind
That's
of
true.
mentally switch. That's the thing I find a little bit.
But if you think about the social media feed, then you also have the incoming things, and then you click on one and it expands, and then you have the comments. And the comments then again are the oldest comment first, and the newest comment is at the bottom. Unless Facebook has changed it. I've deleted my Facebook accounts 2 years ago, but that's what I was used to.
Yeah.
And I think on Twitter, it's the same. Twitter, you have the feed coming in, newest on top, but when you click in and you have a thread, the thread is then again from oldest to newest.
Yeah, that's a good comparison, and that's actually true here. I think we leave it as it is, and it feels good as it is.
Okay, so yeah, I will take just as a note that the highlighting in this timeline should be improved, so that actually should be introduced, that you see what stage is selected. Yeah.
Maybe just a quick feedback, because you have the mouse right here. The dev stage and production label, are they redundant? Redundant, and do we actually need them? Because on the timeline we see the stages.
Yeah, when you have the highlighting here, probably we don't need, and especially this, yeah, this part here is duplicate information.
Duplicate. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, can be removed here.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much, and that's from my side.
Okay, I think, does anyone else have anything to present? Bernd, maybe you?
I think there's nothing in which is not really worth to show.
All right.
No, not really.
Okay, I think then we're done.
Are there questions from the... No questions in the chat. All right.
Yep, then see ya.
See you next week.
Cool.
Bye-bye.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.